show off the sweater moment. Hello everyone, my name is Elliot. I'm an artist, I'm a writer, I wear big sweaters. Before we start with this video, I just want to send as positive energy as possible. The world is really crazy and really messed up, and there's a lot of really sad and unfortunate and terrifying and soul-crushing stuff going on in the news here in the United States and globally, and I just hope that at the very least everyone is taking care of themselves. I hope you guys understand that as much as we do need to remain conscious of things and work to try to make the world a better place, that has to involve a degree of taking care of ourselves. And even though there are so many terrible things in the world right now, we still owe it to ourselves to enjoy the really good things and the things that we do enjoy, and we owe it to ourselves to unplug way more often than we do. So if anything comes from this video in your life, let it be that, and just know that I'm rooting for you to do your best and to be happy. Anyway, let's talk about Jack Harlow. So opinions about Jack Harlow are shifting so violently that it's getting really tedious. I've been critical of Jack Harlow on social media. A lot of people have, and I could probably be a little bit less harsh sometimes. Not like Jack Harlow has had the best press as of late. Of course, there's this album that we'll talk about a bit that hasn't been the most warmly received, but he's also now apparently embroiled in this bit of a battle with Brandy, who he didn't recognize, and has dissed him on his own record. And then also there was this unfortunate, poorly planned incident that took place at an NBA game where he for some reason decided to prank a camera person by turning off their camera. That's why I made this motion with my hand. That didn't go over well. It was a very not nice thing to do, and I bet Jack probably has some regrets about it. I don't know him personally, of course. This video is not going to be a big parasocial deep dive, though I do love doing those from time to time. I really do want to focus on the art that Jack Harlow makes. Particularly, I want to talk about his lyricism and where he stands as an artist. Because of all the stuff that's going on, you just kind of get this study of groupthink and circle jerking and social media, and the harshness sometimes can override a constructive conversation. I feel in the face of all that, and in the face of, sometimes falling for the circle jerk like we all do, I feel this compulsion to kind of take some time out, not necessarily to just praise him, but to analyze his work with some degree of nuance and to really care about talking about it in a productive way. Why is Jack Harlow's new album, and now his whole musical output in general, if you ask some people, considered mid? Is Jack Harlow mid? What are his strengths and weaknesses as a songwriter? How do they showcase his ideas and his perception, and where he could, potentially improve? Why do people resonate with his music? Why might they not? All of this and more in today's video, Jack Harlow, a lyrical analysis, starring your boy. Also, for some reason, there's this dude that screams, blood-curdling screams all the time now at this time of night. And I don't know if he's outside or if he's next door. It's very loud, and I hope that it doesn't happen throughout this video, but if it does, don't say I didn't warn you. I don't really be at no shindigs. So we're gonna start with a song that came out a few years back called Dark Night. Dark Night, in the music video, features perhaps my favorite Jack Harlow in terms of just overall presentation, because he's got the beardless, glasses wearing thing going on. There's a little bit of dorkiness. He's a little skinny. Gee, I wonder what's resonating about that for me. What's interesting about Jack Harlow, for one, is that you can really track his development as an artist over the years in a way that you're not necessarily accustomed to doing with other artists of his stature in hip-hop or outside of it. You don't really get a chance to see the stuff get documented and then revisited that an artist did when they were a teenager, and the way that their career developed over time with information on it. But Jack definitely has built a lot of his stuff from the ground up. Not to say he pulled himself up by his bootstraps in the cliche kind of neoliberal way, but he worked really hard, and a lot of what has happened in his career has come as a result of his direct involvement and his vision and his work on that in a way that, isn't necessarily to be taken for granted, because there's a lot of artists that, whether or not they're great artists or great people, definitely, got in the industry and got to their stature because their dad knows somebody or their dad is somebody. And like, I'm not one of those people that's like obsessed with that, because at the end of the day, what are you doing with your platform, with your situation? But it is also just interesting to see that Jack Harlow has, you know, taken himself from his position as a middle-class kid from Kentucky, built it up, and gone through many different phases. There's a phenomenon going on where a lot of people are revisiting his music when he called himself Mr. Harlow and he was a teenager, and he was doing like the YouTube freestyle rap kind of thing that I actually have some sentimental, you know, attachment to, because I kind of experienced that same thing too. When I was in high school, I was on YouTube and putting freestyles out there and doing the ciphers and stuff like that. It's a very specific experience that not many people really understand. There's the nerdiness of it, there's the griminess of it. It's just a lot. It was a lot. You can see also how he develops into Jack Harlow and how his voice and style develop. By the time he's 18 or 19, he's done successful shows as well as unsuccessful ones by his accord, and he's put out multiple releases. He's developed a bit of this southern twang in his rap voice. It's interesting because a lot of people conceive of the rap voice as being something you're almost kind of born with, especially accent wise. Like, there's a real regionality to hip hop where you listen to a rapper and their accent and their style really comes from this regional thing. Like, oh my god, that guy is from New Orleans, I can tell. There's all these kinds of things that we see as natural, but a lot of the time it is developed over time. There's a general theme about it all, which is that Jack Harlow was, you know, this kid who really liked hip hop, really liked to rhyme words. You can tell he just really likes rhyming words, and he developed and fleshed out his ideas, his aesthetic, his vibe in this conscious way, which kind of seems surprising because when we think about Jack Harlow's persona, we think about a guy who's very laid back and secure, but at the end of the day, he is somebody who thinks a lot about his presentation and about how he presents himself in his music, and you can tell with how his, you know, rap style and his music develops over time. So one of the things we're going to talk about a lot is that Jack Harlow really loves multis. What's a multi, you ask? A multi is short for a multisyllabic rhyme, which is something that if you're a hip hop nerd, you're very familiar with. It is seen as one of the essential technical skills for a good rap lyricist, is that you rhyme multiple syllables with your end rhyme or with your internal rhymes, and that demonstrates a skill because it's more or less easy to rhyme single syllabic rhymes. It's very easy to do cat and hat and stuff like that. But when you're doing 3, 4, 5 syllables at a time, something that someone like MF Doom just perfected and turned into this amazing thing. But there's many rappers, you know, who have been trying to do that for decades. It's something that was introduced by Rakim and Cool G Rap and Big Daddy Kane. It developed, and more rappers were really trying to prove themselves as being great lyricists. And so folks like Rakim, who, you know, is considered one of the greatest of all time and a pioneer, he pioneered hip hop and rapping, particularly because of how complex he would make his rhymes. And part of how he would make his rhymes complex was that he would rhyme 2, 3, 4 syllables in a lot of his verses. So if you see Dark Knight, if you see Jack Harlow say stuff like, riding through the city with the windows down, heard you were talking about him right there, boy, I swear to God, you better switch pronouns. You know, that's a pretty slick 3-syllable rhyme scheme. There's a notable kind of through line of influence because Jack Harlow, he came from that YouTube rap thing, right? A person who was very notable in the late 2000s and early 2010s in the YouTube rap scene was Dime a Dozen from Brooklyn. He had a bunch of different records, both freestyles and originals, that had some real traction. He got a lot of views, and Jack Harlow was a fan of his. Jack Harlow actually, in a video for Elle where he was doing the song guess thing, I can't describe it right now, but it's a song guessing game, and one of the songs that he names is a Dime a Dozen song that's kind of obscure called Body on Me, and they ended up having like this conversation via text that Dime a Dozen posted where Jack Harlow's telling him like, yo, that whole thing you did in that song where you're doing this rhyme scheme, this polysyllabic rhyme scheme through a full song and just carrying it out as much as possible is something that really influences me. In the 90s and 2000s, the multisyllabic rhyme scheme is something that develops more and more. It's something that you see a lot in like the backpacker underground rap scenes, especially if you look at like the battle rap scene. Of course, we talk about Eminem a lot when we talk about early battle rap, him being on Scribble Jam, but a lot of those rappers were doing similar things where you would rhyme 3, 4 syllables at a time, hopefully off the top of your head, because it wasn't seen as cool to have pre-writtens, although usually people had pre-writtens all the time. But the thing about Eminem is that he was one of the early sort of folks that really made that popular when he broke out into the mainstream. But in the meantime, there were so many underground rappers doing it, and in these competitions, actually, you know, Eminem of course is a white guy, and this scene is like the guy that all white rappers are compared to. But there was also a lot of other white rappers in the underground. There have been white rappers since the beginning of hip-hop generally, but like especially in the 90s and 2000s, the sort of alternative grimy nature of the underground rap scene led to a lot of like white kids really seeing themselves in it. Folks like Idea, rest in peace, A$AP Rock, LP, but of course also a lot of the Scribble Jam competitors. Scribble Jam was this freestyle over the beat rhyming battle rap competition, and you had dudes like Mac Lethal, Thesaurus, Immaculate that won that competition in the 2000s that were white guys, and they were nerdy white guys in a lot of ways. You know, their style was kind of nerdy, and they were, you know, a lot of what the emphasis became was like how many syllables can you rhyme and can it be something that's coherent and sounds good. That ends up being the DNA behind Grind Time, which is a battle league that was pretty popular for some years, and King of the Dot, which is still running in Toronto. And a lot of it is white guys. You know, it's an interesting conversation, right? There's like a strong lineage of white rappers who are like an underground influence, kind of lyric focus, and especially are into their multis. There's optimistic readings of this, like obviously hip hop is one of the most beautiful and powerful things, and it's just so beautiful that so many people from different backgrounds around the world can kind of connect to this as this basically the front line of poetry of our era, where you have people that are really into writing and rhyming words, and so folks that come from any background that are into that can kind of find themselves taking part in hip-hop and loving that. A thing about that though is that especially in the past 20 years you've seen hip-hop develop more and more as something that you don't take part in but you try to take over. It's become super hyper capitalistic like everything else, and a lot of the deal becomes first and foremost that like a lot of white rappers come in and try to be like, I'm the best rapper ever because I can rhyme all these syllables. And since Eminem is the best rapper ever and he did that, I'm gonna do that, which is where you get like the kind of cringe YouTube rap scene that some people will talk about now with like those Eminem kind of imposter guys. And also people kind of have to realize that just because you did something technically difficult doesn't mean that it's good. Like as a rapper, just because you rhymed all these syllables together doesn't mean for one that the rhyme is even good, because you might not have even made it coherent. But also, you know, it doesn't make it good because something has to connect. It has to be a resonant verse. You can't just say, well, because I meet these technical criteria, I am the best. It's like the Nathan Chen school of lyrical rap. All my figure skating heads know what's up. So this creates kind of this tension and one of these different complex conversations to have in hip hop. But yeah, there's basically this like lyrical white rapper formula that it's so interesting because Jack Harlow kind of comes from that lineage, especially when you see how he starts as a rapper. But what his project essentially is finding a way to take that like nerdy, essentialist, kind of purist backpack, I want to rhyme really well essence, and putting that in a package of like, oh well, this is an affable person that people will find cool and that will make mainstream accessible music and that will become a pop culture figure. That is the Jack Harlow project, and for the most part it's succeeded. He does it in part because he has this natural charisma that we should probably talk about more so with a song that is kind of similar to Dark Knight but comes years afterwards, in What's Poppin'. Sports in the top 10. So What's Poppin' is kind of similar in structure to Dark Knight in that both are essentially freestyles, although in What's Poppin', apparently according to Cole Bennett told him to just bring back the first like 4 or 8 bars of the verse, the freestyle, at the end and basically make it a hook. And it became a very sticky hook. It's part of what made that song blow the hell up like it did, because it had this sticky hook. But if you listen to the hook, it's him rapping and it's him doing the lyrical thing. It's this kind of evolution of the Dark Knight thing and like a lot of what he was doing earlier, and that he is really hammering home those multis. And the multis aren't, you know, forced. One thing about Jack Harlow is that he will rap all these multis, all these polysyllabic rhyme schemes, but you don't get the sense that you're forcing it. And forced multis are definitely a problem in a lot of sectors of like more underground, more lyrical hip hop. There's a bar from this Florida rapper whose name is escaping me right now, but he's telling this dude like, when this fat man's hungry, he searches through trash cans monthly. And it's like, why would he search monthly if he's hungry in the moment. It doesn't really make sense, but it's just like that whole idea of just cramming that thing in because it sounds like it makes sense and it rhymes. Jack Harlow doesn't do that, and that's part of what makes What's Poppin' so good. He's able to really create, first of all, a hook in the what's poppin' part. What's poppin', brand new whip, just hopped in. That's a 3-bar rhyme scheme, but it's also it's catchy, right? And then he's able to string these words together, these lines together, where it's almost like he's talking, he's communicating, which is really one of the great gifts of great rappers, is being able to like sound like you're talking, or sound like you're doing something completely different from just rhyming. It's really hard to really focus on rhyming and rapping well and not sound like you're focusing on rhyming and rapping well, rather than, you know, performing a song or like speaking to an audience. Jack Harlow's pretty good at that. My personal favorite part that's demonstrative of that is this whole scheme where he says, I feel resentment from every direction. Even some homies be wearing expressions. I be discouraged from sharing my blessings. We used to share a connection. Now it just feels like it's wearing and stretching. I'm getting real sick of taking advice from people that never could stare at reflections. It's a great scheme. That's a great rhyme scheme. The whole time he could basically be saying that to you in a conversation, and he's making these notes of these ideas in his head and these kind of philosophies, but at the same time it's all connected through this pretty intricate rhyme scheme. It's like 5 syllables. He just rips that off, and he does more. Like, it's just crazy. And so I remember being taken aback by this song because I was like, oh wow, he's rhyming pretty well. And even though the music and the style of it wasn't necessarily for me, I could tell that it was different. And that's one of the key things with Jack Harlow that is part of why so many people felt like this guy has it, he's next up, because his style is kind of singular. He's got this southern young dude thing going on. He's got this affability, this charisma, this kind of flirtatiousness, but there's also this playfulness, also this kind of dorkiness a little bit if he wants to turn that note up. But ultimately it feels genuine and it feels unique. Cole Bennett does a really great job with this music video and really bringing out the sort of silly parts of Jack Harlow's personality with the facial expressions and stuff. And it worked really, really well. I mean, you come away from that music video like, wow, that's a character, that's a person, that's a persona that lives in my head now. It's something that really stands out. And in addition to that, oh, the beat is pretty hard and he's rapping his ass off. This is cool. I mean, you watch that and, you know, for most of us, you just couldn't help but be like, well, whether it's for me or not, that guy's going places. And go places he did. So now we're going to talk about another song in First Class, which is his hit single from this year. This is just 2 years after What's Poppin'. First Class, it has this Fergie glamorous sample, and he's doing this thing now where he's, you know, I mean, he's written hooks before. He's always written hooks at different points. It just happened to be that his freestyles were usually the more popular songs. But in this one, he's definitely like, okay, I'm writing a hook. But then what he does with the hook is super sparse. He plays off of the sample, like the vocal sample, which is the GLAMOROUS from the Fergie song. But then he plays off of it. I've been a G, throw up the L, sex in the A, M, It's catchy, right? It's nice, catchy songwriting. But I think that there's a bit of a mixed bag with this record. It's demonstrative of a lot of sort of the controversy over how good Jack Harlow really is. You know, the mixed reactions to the song and sort of the mixed results of the song. Because on one hand, it is catchy, it is well produced, and there are some nice moments. He's bringing the multis back, which again, you don't have to rap multis to be good at rapping, and sometimes it's better if you don't. But it's cool for him to continue to do that because it is a really cool writing technique that can create some really good lines, especially for somebody who's nerdy about rhymes, like myself. So he does the whole, what's the line? You don't need Givenchy, you need Jesus. Why do y'all sleep on me? I need reasons. That's another pretty long polysyllabic rhyme scheme that he just kind of tosses in. But for the most part in the song, he's actually not doing that. He's actually kind of doing more simple rhyme schemes. The verses are shorter, they're 12 bars each. It's a short song and it's sparse. It's sparse even as a short song, which is it's kind of a risky thing to do. It's like he's trying to tap into that smoothness and that charisma that a lot of people know him for. Hold on, let me check the camera. Doing so and trying to still be like, well, let me at least try to be still like a little ill, but like pick my moments. It takes a lot of balance. It takes a lot of patience and assuredness to try to pull that off. And it's a mixed bag, like I said. You know, there's parts where the lyricism is pretty cool, but when he's not really doing this audacious thing of like really putting these clever bars and like these clever rhyme schemes together, kind of takes away from some of his natural strengths as a rapper. You have to have a very mixed, like multifaceted bag to be able to do that, and it's kind of like he's developing those other parts of himself as a writer still. And there's moments where it's like, ooh, like, don't know if in a song where you're not rapping that much and you're kind of, you know, allowing all this space for you to say these kind of simple things, I don't know if like sweet semen was a good idea. He's definitely gotten a lot of shtick for that, and honestly deservedly so. That was just a really, it kind of kills the song, honestly, because I do like the song, but then that part comes on and I'm just, why do I have to hear Jack Harlow brag about making his semen sweet? And why use the word semen? Like, it doesn't feel good in any way. It's balanced too. It's awkward, especially because it's not a silly song. It's not a song where he's like, let me say some outrageous stuff. It's a song where he's being introspective. He's talking at one point about, you know, I don't like being away from my family so much. I want to give my mom a big house. And it's kind of pared down. It's kind of quiet. It's trying to be kind of smooth. So then it's just awkward for him to interject with like, let me say something really goofy and fucking kind of gross. But that's the thing. It's like most of the record, Come Home the Kids Miss You, which is his second album. The first one, That's What They All Say, came out in 2020 with What's Poppin' and stuff. It did fairly well. But with the second album, which is basically poised as like his big breakout, it's essentially like his debut record. It's presenting him now with this charisma and this sort of persona that he's developed over the past couple of years as his star has risen, and he's gotten these red carpet moments and interviews where people are like, oh wow, Jack Harlow's so smooth, he's so charismatic. And I think that there was a conscious choice with the label and with him and his team to be like, let's bring that out more. Let me tap into that, which is, you know, a far cry from what he was doing on Dark Knight years before, what he's doing on What's Poppin' 2 years earlier. And What's Poppin', you get this kind of like almost fratty kind of dude, like, let me just joke around. Like, yeah, he's a little smooth and charismatic, but he's also like, fuck it, I was what's poppin', brand new whip, just hopped in, I could pass that bitch like Stockton, you know. It's like very like goofy and braggadocious. So for him to tap into this more self-serious bag, this more like, I'm smooth, I'm charming, I'm a ladies man kind of thing, you know, that could easily go south. And for a lot of people, it did. Again, he's moving away from those things that kind of made him sort of outstanding at what he did, even though, you know, it's not like he was like groundbreaking with what he was doing on What's Poppin', but those are his strengths. And, you know, it's great as an artist to flex some different muscles, to expand, but it's very risky, and it's something that you got to put a lot of consideration into, which, you know, with some of the verses that he's rapping on this record, you can kind of feel like, even if you're really trying, it's feeling like you're missing some points, like you didn't flesh this out as well. It's like a fighter who's like, oh, I'm gonna get into this MMA match, but he hasn't really developed his grappling very well. So it's like, you know, okay, you felt really good about this and wanted to expand your horizons, but maybe a few more jiu-jitsu classes. You know what I mean? No? Okay. It's well produced as a record, I have to say. I mean, I think it's a very catchy beat. I like the little piano moments. I like the little staccato, like, reminds me of like 2000s crunk influenced R&B, like Sierra, you know, like that part is cool. Like there's definitely this nostalgia that he plays into with the record too, that's pretty cool. You know, I'm nostalgic for the same era he's nostalgic about. But there's growing pains. There's growing pains throughout the record, and not in the like growing pains, I'm dealing with it in a very visible, very self-effacing way. It's more easy to lambast him because it's like, well, he's got this confident, charismatic, unflappable persona, and he's being hyped as like this next big thing as an artist. So for him to have these growing pains and these clear awkward points, these clear sort of, you know, misses, it makes it a lot easier for people to be like, well, screw this, because this guy, look at what he's doing, like look at this miss that he had here, and look at this. And that allows people to sort of stretch the criticism of the record maybe a little bit farther than is necessary, although everybody's got their opinions. I can totally understand if you don't like the record. I don't like the record, so, but it's still like this invigorated sense of criticism rather than this reflective sense of criticism, because it's like, we're gonna stick it to the famous guy that they're trying to king. They're trying to king this guy, and we're gonna take him down a peg. And it's not like Harlow is trying to present himself as this impregnable dude. I mean, he's trying to be introspective and reflective and show some of his insecurities, but it just feels like he hasn't studied how to do that well, or like flesh that out as well as he needed to. It kind of felt like because he knew how good he is at doing certain things as a rapper and how big this moment was and all those things going on in his life, it kind of felt like he was like, well, I'm gonna do this now, but he wasn't exactly fully ready to do it because he wasn't exactly developed in those areas, and he wasn't exactly, you know, it's just like he hasn't fleshed it out enough. I can kind of retread this point over and over again, but it'd be better to talk about a final song. We'll talk about Churchill Downs featuring Drake.
I defeat these youngins to the metaverse.
So that's another record off of this album that got a lot of talk. It got leaked, actually, which he was upset about, understandably so. And when it got leaked, and even as it appeared on the album, the discourse around it was mostly like, oh, Drake bodied Jack Harlow on this song, which is like, it's kind of rough, but it's also understandable. I mean, Drake's been in the game for a long time. He's no slouch as a writer. He has some bad moments as a writer, and he's not necessarily considered a lyricist, but I think he is good lyrically when he's in his bag. You know, if you listen to a song like Lord Knows, you can definitely see that. And on Churchill Downs, I think Drake comes through with a very, very good verse, regardless of what you think about his shots at Pusha T or whatever. And it sees Jack Harlow trading off with Drake in this really kind of interesting, almost callbacky way, because it's a lot like what happened with Drake's breakout record, what was supposed to be his breakthrough record, his debut album, Thank Me Later. Thank Me Later is a lot like this Jack Harlow album in a lot of ways, in that when it came out, it was seen as underwhelming. It was seen as like, oh, this is the next guy up in 2010. Well, you know what? He's got a lot of work to do. He's not really all that. And there was a song on Thank Me Later called Light Up featuring Jay-Z, wherein Drake, it's this introspective, moody beat, kind of like Churchill Downs, and Drake raps first, and then Jay-Z raps second as like the veteran and the legend, and Jay-Z kind of bodies him. I mean, it wasn't as dramatic, you know, in terms of people's readings of it as people seem to see Churchill Downs as, but I think people generally feel like Jay-Z really did his thing, and Drake was still not super polished at that point, even though his verse was cool. And on Churchill Downs, you get a very similar thing where Drake now is that veteran and that sort of living legend status as a rapper who has fleshed himself out and is so comfortable, and he just comes on and his verse is great. But before that, you get to sit through a longish Jack Harlow verse where it's just the differences are kind of evident. It's not a super big knock on Jack Harlow to be outshone a little bit from time. Every rapper gets outshined at some point. Okay, Jay-Z got outshined by Eminem when that, you know, Renegade record came out, although Jay-Z's verses were underrated, but still, you know, it happens. And especially when it's somebody who you look up to. Clearly Drake is a huge idol of Jack Harlow's. It's understandable, like, okay, he beat you on that record, he got you. And rap is very competitive. People don't look at it like that with other genres, but with rap it's definitely like, okay, who came with the harder verse? The thing is, it's so clear what Jack Harlow is missing when you listen to Drake. It's like on that beat especially, which is such a Drake type beat almost, and it's a really good beat. And it's not like Jack Harlow is like horrible on the song, but like his writing is just not at the level that it tries to impress upon the listener. Jack Harlow's trying to convey like, I am ambitious, I am next up, I am this big deal, and people need to really understand that I'm coming and that I'm great. And it's just kind of like, especially when you then listen to Drake do the same thing and do the thing that is really his bag, it's like, oh, you know, like, damn, like maybe not, maybe a few more nights in the gym, you know? Because again, Jack Harlow has these strengths as a rapper, but this record isn't playing to them so much. It's his attempt to sort of get into that Drake introspective lyrical bag of talking about fame, talking about his issues, and also talking about his successes in this very interesting contradictory way. And yeah, his verse is okay. It has some nice moments, but like, let's talk about Drake's verse, right? What makes Drake's verse so great? It's imaginative and it's so imagery focused. Drake loves painting a pretty vivid and unique picture with his rhymes to sort of give you an impression of a moment in his life and things that are going through his mind. He's always doing what, you know, any writer, no matter what form of writing it is, has heard before, especially in creative writing, which is show, don't tell. You show the listener what the emotion and what the situation is, rather than just say, this is the situation, this is the emotion. He opens the verse, Drake, using this contrast of abstract and literal. He says, cold hearts and heated floors. That's the first 5 words he says, and already it's like, wow, because, you know, a cold heart is a metaphorical thing, but then the heated floors, you get this image of luxury. It's a very specific image, right? So specific. And he's using these mundane images like heated floors or other things, like when he says, therapy sessions, I'm in the waiting room reading forms, abandonment issues I'm getting treated for. Like that image of, you know, a person sitting in a chair in like the waiting room reading of Forbes magazine. Like, this is a very specific thing that you can not only just picture Drake doing, but that you've experienced and that you've never thought about in this specific manner of like, famous successful rappers dealing with his abandonment issues. It's just so vivid, it's so specific, and it's imagery. It's not just like, I have abandonment issues. It's, this is the situation that's going on right now, and this is why, and these are these things that I'm noticing that really put you in this place. He says at one point when he's talking about his anger issues that he's having with people messing with him, and he talks about, my urges for revenge are uncontrollable. Like, you know, that's just not something you say. Like, that's such a audacious thing. There's an audacity that you kind of need to be a really great lyricist as a rapper, and to be able to be saying things that sound almost a little corny or a little crazy, but just feel very natural to you and feel very stand out as like this thing, like, I'm just gonna say this, and this is exactly what I want to convey, whether or not it's something you would think I should convey. Like, that's the kind of audacity that you have to have, and then you also have to pair it with a real understanding of the art form, the audience, how to put your words together, etc. So then when you contrast that with Jack Harlow's verse, he's telling you things, but he's not showing you these things. He says at one point, I'm done being extra with the extroverts. It's a good bar, right? But it's a one-off. And then he says, I work hard, but hard shit don't need no extra work. That's why I show up in a sweatshirt and let it burn. He says, let it burn. But he's saying burn. The world's mine, I just say F it, let it turn. The girl's mine, I just say F it, have a turn. Like, okay, the world's mine, the girl's mine, I work hard. Like, these are literal things that he says in those 4 lines. It's not, oh, this is who the girl is and this is what we're doing tonight. It's not, this is what she's wearing. This is what she decided to wear because she's so into whatever. Like, there's no sense of like, let's put a specific image at play. Let's put specific ideas at play that really show you exactly what the situation is. It's very unimaginative in that way. And it's very much like, it gives you that sense of almost this narrative that maybe it's a little too convenient, but it feels pretty much on the nose, where it's like, Jack Harlow is this guy who really is trying to convey to you exactly what level he's on, that he's with the greats, that he's rapping with Drake, that he's, you know, this great person, that he has these great things. But he's desperate to tell it to you. He's telling you this is what's happening, instead of being like, I'm going to show you exactly what the image is, and if you understand it, you understand it. There's that insecurity in that isn't conveyed directly. It's not like, I'm insecure, these are the things I feel. It's not an intentional choice. It's like, he thinks he's doing what Drake is doing, but he's not. And I don't want to sound so harsh. It's really hard to do what Drake is doing, and Jack Harlow still has a lot of skill. His verse is still like something you can listen to, you know, his flow is great, but it's like, oh, like that's something you could really work on. It's like expanding so much of your idea of what you're observing and what you're putting forth on a record to convey certain ideas, and allowing it to be so open to interpretation while still, you know, kind of putting forward the image in a specific way. He says at one point, at the shows, I'm about to start handing out programs because y'all need to get with the program. He says something about, they don't know Jack. It's like, like I know you really want to emphasize to people that this is the big thing, and that you're more than what people think you are, but like, you're really not showing that. You're really not giving us that. You're trying to tell us something, and it kind of makes it very ineffective when you're trying to tell people what they should be thinking or how they should be approaching you. It's a very ineffective way of communicating, because it gives you that sense of desperation or that sense of underwhelm, where it's like, okay, cool, great, you're great. At the end of that verse, you get this kind of empty feeling almost, because it's like, especially with the context, like, okay, this is Jack Harlow, this is his breakout moment, this is his big record, this is him going toe to toe with Drake, these are the things that he's saying, and yet you come away like, what did I just listen to? You know, like, did he distinguish himself, or was he just saying things? Did he know exactly what he wanted to do? So it's just kind of like, Anyway, conclusion. I'd love to get in a rant about the Poison record with Lil Wayne, just to point out that so many people didn't realize that I eat so many shrimp I got iodine poisoning is a Pimp C bar. And it was like, damn, you guys haven't heard sipping on some scissorp? Anyway, my conclusion on Jack Harlow, he's a very talented writer. He has a strong grasp on the art of rhyming, and he has a strong grasp of his own natural charisma, and he's developed well enough as an artist to nail some key aspects of being accessible yet technically impressive, which is not an easy thing to do as a rap artist. However, he's in this middle ground. He's in this turning point of his career. He's certainly in a turning point in terms of certain public opinions, and he's getting some backlash now, which is something he's gonna have to deal with and figure out. He's talked about staying humble, which is great, but at the same time, like, he's not yet at that level that I think he wants to be at, of being like somebody who's really leaving his mark and being genuinely impactful on a larger level than just, hey, that's Jack Harlow. Oh, he's so smooth and like he raps well. I mean, one of the things that's said about Jack Harlow half the time, Needle Drop says this, is like, oh, well, he's good in small doses, but not in a full record like this. And that kind of demonstrates that you're not fleshed out at that level in terms of your vision, in terms of like the different skill sets you have. So yeah, it's like, oh, you know, he's great in that Pocket and Industry Baby when he does that verse, but it's like, that's a dose. In order for people to really buy into your full album, you have to be able to understand exactly what you're putting forward and exactly how you're gonna do it in a unique and effective way. Even though his persona is so distinguished and his lyrical abilities is polished, there's still this kind of underwhelming nature about him. And I think a lot of it is that he doesn't take many risks. Like the music, like the instrumentals aren't super experimental. It's not like he needs to rap over like some clipping shit, but like, you know, okay, we've heard this kind of beat before, we've heard this kind of style before from you, we've heard these themes from you before. And then there's little variation in terms of how he approaches writing about these themes. It's not like he switches into, okay, I'm gonna tell a story on this record to show how cool I am, and then on this next record I'm going to write a haiku. You know, it's not like he's doing all these varied things. He's kind of making the same thing over and over again in a lot of ways, and that can be wearing on people. Thankfully though, he has a lot of time to flesh himself out, and I look forward to seeing how he develops as an artist. There's these styles I'd like to see him do. I'd love to see him try jazz rap. I'd love to see him try like R&B tinge stuff, more alternative stuff. I want to see him flesh things out. I want to see, because, you know, nobody's perfect. Everybody's gonna have what people see as a dud. Everybody's gonna have controversy about how good they actually are. You know, even for somebody like Kendrick, there was controversy. There's always been people debating things, and you know, that's not to say like you should think of yourself as Kendrick, but you should definitely look in this moment as Jack Harlow and be like, okay, there's some things I can work on, there's some things I can try out. Let me expand the width of who I am as an artist. That's what Drake did, that's what Jay-Z did, that's what so many artists did, and it takes time. And he's 24, he's got a lot of time to do that. You know, and as a person, I don't know him as a person, but you know, it takes expansion of yourself as a person to do that. And you know, hopefully he stays away from the knucklehead stuff like turning off people's cameras and stuff. You know, you don't need to do that. The biggest thing is like, what does Jack Harlow have to say? What does he have to say? What is his message? What is his idea? It doesn't have to be super deep, but what is it that he's trying to say, and how, and what can we get from it? Though he's facing a lot of pushback now, all it would take is that leap forward in terms of his vision and his message to make him a true star, or at the very least like an impactful artist. So I can't wait to watch and see how he goes about it, because I like music and I'm interested in stuff. Anyway, that's the end of the video. Thank you guys for your support. Thank you for the kind messages you've left on my channel over the past few months. I took some time to recalibrate, and it's been kind of a hard year. Had COVID this week, I had a bunch of sicknesses and things come up, but I'm, you know, gonna make some more videos now, and I'm gonna kind of talk about music more. So I hope you like it, and I hope you stick around, but if not, that's fine. Just leave a like, comment, and subscribe on this video, and then pretend I don't exist, because I'll at least get the algorithm help. But if you do want to stick around, do that anyway, and then also stick around. I'm Elliot.